Hello again, everybody, and welcome to an all-over-the-page edition of the Jim Cornette Experience. Who knows what the fuck we're going to talk about today? I can tell you part of it. Big news on the brand new Midnight Express 35th Anniversary Experience package. Also, we're going to talk about my trip back to the NWA Crockett Cup in Charlotte, my trip back to 1986. A follow-up on the show on Montreal, double crosses, and etc., and who knows where that will lead, and so much more. And to join me in this, Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you, the post office playboy, Swammy's pappy, Susie's favorite boy, the proprietor of the French Toast Chateau, and all-around Outlaw Mud Show co-host, trademark, your friend and mine, the great Brian Last.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again, trademark, for another packed week of the Jim Cornette Experience.
Oh, God, I can't. I've been so busy. I'm so verklempt, as Howard Finkel would say. I've got just stacks of things I've just jotted down, like talk about this or talk about that, but no cohesiveness here to the program. So we're gonna be around our elbow to get to our wrist today.
Around our elbow to get. I've never heard that expression before.
When you go the long way, or you take the hard way, or the long way, or the more complicated way, you're going around your elbow to get to your wrist.
All right.
What is it that you people up north talk about? You have no phrases and patterns of speech and similes and soliloquies and things. You have none of these. You just, I went to the fucking diner.
Who in New York have you ever met that has said that sentence? Ever?
I went over to the fucking diner.
No, that doesn't even sound like anyone I've ever met. Sounds more like Philly and South Jersey, if we're going to be quite honest.
So North Jersey and South Jersey is like East and West Berlin. It's completely different fucking cultures. And
Yes.
All right, I'll have to take your word for this then.
Are North and South Florida different cultures?
Well, you got me there, but it's a longer state. New Jersey's no bigger than a hiccup.
Well, it's pretty long.
Oh, yes. Well, that's what she said when I let her up. But
it's got some length. It's got some girth. It's a good state.
That's what people who are trying to make up for their lack of size say. It's got some length and some girth. New Jersey's a flaccid state if I've ever seen one. Anyway. You know what I've just realized now is we can't make this transition. I'm going to try to. We're going from talking about penis similes to Stan Lane's mother here, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm so sorry, Stanfield, if you're listening, that we have to do this. But guess what happened? And we'll talk about the trip to Charlotte here in a little while on the program. But I have to backtrack. We got so many new listeners now. I want to make sure everybody knows who I'm talking about here. Stan Lane's mother. I'm not going to mention her first name. People might look her up, but she's a wonderful woman. And I've known her obviously since the mid 80s. And she is 98 years old. Because Stan's his father, when he passed away, was just a few years ago, was like 93 or 4 or whatever. That's why Stan has those ridiculous genetics, right? Because he looks 25 years younger than he is. But anyway, she fell and here not too terribly long ago and broke her wrist. But up till that point, she'd been living alone and driving. As a matter of fact, that was when she fell and broke her wrist, she still had the cast on it. She was looking at Stan like, well, I guess you're going to make me quit driving. Right now, because she's 98. But that's it. The lanes are feisty, right? So anyway, they made the decision. She didn't need to be in the big house and everything. So she's moved to, I mean, they didn't put her in a home. I'm not saying that, but one of those senior communities where you got your place, but there's people around and there's transportation around the grounds and things and such of that nature. And she's doing better now. And I'm sure everybody, if wants to wish her well, just Stan's mom. But anyway, in the process, this is where she has given a gift to the fans of the Jim Cornette and to Midnight Express fans all over the world. In the process of moving and helping Stan's mother move, guess what Stan found in the closet? Apparently,
Steve Kern.
Well, no, that was not Super 70s pics, tweeted those pics, but Steve Kern is not now, nor has he ever been in the closet. And he's not open about it. I don't know when did you stop beating your wife? Anyway, let's get off that subject completely. Apparently, I overestimated the number of family and friends that the Midnight Express members would want to give the Midnight Express scrapbook to years ago when it first came out, because they didn't apparently give enough of them away. Stan Lane's mother, that's Sylvia's mother by Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show. Stan Lane's mother was the hoarder of 2 boxes of Midnight Express books.
Oh, get out of here.
We now have officially, however, depleted everybody. Dennis Condry's closet is empty. Mine has been empty for quite some time. Bobby's was empty, and now Stan's was empty. But now Stan Lane's mother's closet is empty. And we're doing something special because I once again, I said this last time, I said, I don't want to be like I'm price gouging people, but we keep underestimating the rarity and the demand for the Midnight Express scrapbook. Because I said, certainly, when we had 40 or whatever at $150 a piece, I said, certainly this will satisfy the demand. And they sold out in, what was it? Was it 4 hours or 5? I can't remember.
I thought it was 3, actually.
Whatever the case. But at the same time, I know there's a limit, but this thing has blown up, as they say. So what we're going to do to make it fair and reasonable and rational for everybody involved, because also, as you know, the Midnight Express members are sharing equally in the proceeds from this. And as Dennis Condry said on the pay-per-view Saturday night, he's got 6 doctors he'd like to thank, but he's supporting them too. So, but instead of just offering the book, because people that are going to make this investment, I want them to get their money's worth. I've created one high demand collectible in the book itself. Now we're going to create another high in demand package for the Midnight Express 35th anniversary. This is going to be one, or I should say, you can purchase one of 50. There are going to be 50 of these packages in the world, and they're going to be numbered. And when they're gone, they're gone, and we can't do nothing else about it this time. You get the Midnight Express book signed by all 4 members and personalized to your specifications by me. We are reissuing the Midnight Express 2-disc DVD set that I did years ago, which has all the Midnight Express matches that Vince McMahon doesn't own. Camcorder stuff that a friend of mine shot in Philly of World Tag Title matches with the Road Warriors, Dusty and Magnum, and the Rock and Roll, and independent stuff, and news features, and Japanese television with us and the Rock and Roll from Charlotte at the Coliseum, plus a collector's booklet, not only itemizing the contents, but illustrated with photos and details, amusing anecdotes, as they say, about each of the individual matches and occurrences. That's part of the fucking package. You also get a Midnight Express reunion photo, our 25th anniversary reunion photo that we are reissuing, autographed by all 4 members of the team, personalized by me, a signed autographed 8x10 of the Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condry Jim Cornette Midnight Express, a signed 8x10 of the Bobby Eaton Stan Lane Jim Cornette Midnight Express, a handwritten letter of authenticity by me that will number this package 1 of 50, 2 of 50, etc., and a $25 contribution off of each purchase to the American Cancer Society to continue the fundraising that we've been doing in honor of Dennis's battle with cancer. 50 of these packages, they will go up. I'm not going to give a specific time. When I do that, I break my website. But this coming Monday morning, May the 6th, when you roust yourself out of bed to begin your day, if you go to jimcornette.com, then these packages will be available to purchase. The book, the 2-disc DVD with the collector's booklet, the reunion photo, the both combinations of the Midnight Express photos, the handwritten letter of authenticity, the $25 contribution to the American Cancer Society, 50 packages, and then there will be no more, $449.95.
You know, Jim, I know you're aware of it because you're obviously still involved in a lot of things. You do appearances and you do the show, but for Stan, Bobby, and Dennis, are they at all surprised that the Midnight Express continues to fascinate wrestling fans all these years later?
Yes. Well, as a matter, Bobby's always been humble. Stan's kind of enjoying it because he pays probably less attention to wrestling than any of us these days anymore. And so I think he's enjoying it. And of course, Dennis has really, because, with what he's been through over the past several years and the fact that he left the team early right before the pay-per-view era. So a lot of his great matches either aren't broadcast regularly on the network or whatever. But he's really been especially, touched. I think they all are. And that's the thing is that I'll tell you, Tommy Young, and we'll talk about this with the NWA show wrap up, but Tommy Young's the most surprised of the bunch of all of us. He's just amazed. Corny, it's been 30 years. I can't believe they. But anyway, yes. So the anniversary experience package. And once again, guys, the book on YouTube is on YouTube. What am I talking? The book on fucking eBay, the other fucking oddly named internet service. The book on eBay is up in some cases to $300 now. This is part of a package. It's signed by everybody, and they were still wrapped up in the cellophane. So these are mint condition, uncirculated. And to be honest, I don't care if they go quickly because we're robbing ourselves at this point. When this thing last year you could get one for $100. Now a guy just found one in Half Price Books in Lexington for like $150 or whatever, and that's an odd occurrence to find it that low. So. I don't care if they sell quickly because they'll be up until they do. And all the members of the Midnight Express, thank you for your patronage. As I mentioned, they will all share in the proceeds. But the American Cancer Society alone, what's 50 times 25? That's going to be $1,250 there when they all sell out to American Cancer Society. And I understand if that's not in your budget, folks, and if you just want a photo, the reunion pictures and the pictures of Bobby, Stan, and myself also will be on sale. We autographed extra ones there. It's the same thing as last time with the ones with Dennis, that we didn't do 5,000 of these things. There's, 100, 150 or whatever extras. So when they sell out because we're not going to beat this up. But at the same time, if you want, the same deal applies, $5 off every photo. And it'll be marked on the site, goes to American Cancer Society also. And Jeremy Bagley is doing a wonderful job, wonderful, of doing extra fundraising for the American Cancer Society and in Dennis's behalf. And we're gonna hopefully have big totals on that by the time that we all get together at the gathering in August in Charlotte. But anyway, so that's JimCornette.com on Monday, folks, for the May the 6th, in case you're listening to this in a time warp. And who knows how long they will last. We've talked about the American Cancer Society. I have gotten sidetracked this year, Brian, and have not done a Crusade for Children fundraiser.
Oh, that's right. We usually do it by this point. Yeah.
And well, we're about to fix that. And I guess, I shouldn't say everybody knows what the Crusade for Children is, because you were just telling me before we went on the air how many tens of thousands of new listeners we got last month and blah, blah, blah. So let me go through it real quick.
Hundreds of thousands.
Tens of thousands we got last week. Hundreds of thousands over the course of the last couple of weeks, months, whatever the fuck. We've got a lot of new listeners. Don't interrupt me while I'm on a roll, son. Anyway. The Crusade for Children here in Louisville, Kentucky, is the oldest and largest local fundraising event of its kind in the United States of America. It was started back in the 50s, 1954 to be exact, by WHAS Television. It was started by the Bingham family, Barry Bingham Sr., who was the William Randolph Hearst of Louisville and owned both newspapers and the radio station and television station and everything else in town. He's my dad's old boss. They started the Crusade for Children, where once a year they just blow off network programming on the ABC affiliate for 36 hours and do a local telethon. And within 100 miles of every direction, every fire department goes out and raises money all weekend, which they do all year, but especially they hit the roads and have roadblocks over the weekend. And all the churches raise money and people leave money in their wills, and every business in town is involved, down to, you know, kids with lemonade stands and bake sales, and this 6-year-old kid coming in with a fucking coffee can full of nickels, and everybody gets on television. And over the last 65 years, and they have an endowment that funds the Crusade, so 100% of the donations that you make go back to special needs kids in Kentucky and southern Indiana. And in 65 years, this local telethon has raised $180 million. It's insane, right? And everybody in town does something for the Crusade. So what we did last year, I did an appearance down in Bowling Green and donated the merchandise sales, but also this, for the past 2 years, I guess, maybe, was the restraining order, the Vince Russo restraining order. I basically, every time that you buy one of those at JimCornette.com, $4 goes to the Crusade for Children. And it's the only thing that Russo ever wrote that drew money or made money. And that's been like over, I think, almost $5,000 over the last however long. And I got to send them another check because the Crusade is coming up June 1st and 2nd. So they got another check coming for the last few months. But we've got a new item, I will say, a new T-shirt. We got a great new T-shirt coming out. It's past development and now it's into hopefully implementation where we get this up in a few weeks. But it will be, it's inspired by something I've done recently on one of these mini television broadcasts I've been on, and it was also inspired by Shit Stain himself in a way. So he's going to get credit for raising some more money for crippled children and special needs children in Kentucky and southern Indiana just by being himself. I think that's great. That's great of him. Just by being his obnoxious, disreputable, lying, smarmy, idiot self, he can raise money for special needs kids with his stupidity.
So what is on the shirt?
I'm not saying right now. We'll talk about it later.
Oh, come on.
Also, Dark Side of the Ring on Viceland, Vice TV, all the Vices. They've got all of them wrapped up. They are just a Vice-ridden network. Dark Side of the Ring, have you seen these numbers? Have you heard about this? Have you read about this?
I have.
Every week is going up. And we had Evan Husney on here, the producer of the program, and I predicted to Evan on the phone, I can't remember if it was on the program, because he was like, he wasn't sure whether the ratings were going to be tied to the personality, right? Like Randy Savage was a bigger star than, you know, on television here than Bruiser Brody. So would it be but I said that the shows have been so good and continue to be so good, and the word is spreading. You're going to go up every week. And wouldn't you know who won the pony? Every week, no matter who's featured on the program, because it's a quality show and they're doing a great job on all these stories, the ratings have gone up. And it's a blockbuster. It's a runaway train now. It's not like Super Train that flopped in the ratings. It's a runaway train. So you had to live through the late 70s to get that reference. But anyway, so Dark Side of the Ring next week, we've already met. Last night was the Bruiser Brody episode, correct? Last week was Brody, and last night was the Von Erichs. And this podcast goes out on Thursday, so next Wednesday will be the mysterious death of Gino Hernandez, of Gorgeous Gino. But the thing is, have you seen this? Like even though the new episodes premiere on Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern or whatever, on Thursday night, they're running a block from 7 o'clock to I believe 11 o'clock is all Dark Side of the Ring episodes. Then they break for an hour for Always Sunny, and then they go from like fucking midnight to 6 a.m. with more Dark Side of the Ring.
So Always Sunny's on Viceland?
Yeah, are you fucking ribbing?
What, it's an FX show. I didn't know it was on Viceland.
It has been on Viceland for some time now, and I can't believe it. You didn't, and that's why I check constantly to make sure I'm not missing Always Sunny on Viceland or Dark Side of the Ring. But you can watch them over and over again, folks. Go to sleep watching an episode, leave it on Viceland. When you wake up, another episode or even the same episode will be on because it's the most popular show on television. And I'm on a bunch of it. There may be some correlation there. I'm not sure. But anyway, the ratings keep going up. Make sure you catch it. And live events, I must mention, God almighty, I tell you what, I am just busier than the one-legged waitress at the IHOP here coming up over the next several weeks. So I've got the notes here. Richmond, Virginia, the Holiday Inn on Commerce Road in Richmond on Saturday, May 18th for the two-man Power Trip Podcast Convention 3, or as we affectionately refer to it, TMPT Con 3. Sounds like DEF CON 4. There will be no nuclear waste in the area of the Holiday Inn on Commerce Road in Richmond. On May 18th, when the Midnight Express and I will be there, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson are going to be there. Shane Douglas is going to be with Francine, is going to be there, which is, and I believe, the very first time in Richmond for that to happen. But anyway, the Fan Fest during the day, and then immediately afterwards, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon or so, a VIP pizza party with myself. Tickets and information, tmptofwrestling.com. And I want to see everybody in Richmond on May the 18th. Don't forget, I'm going to be in Milwaukee. Major League Wrestling, the TV tapings on June 1st. Actually, not Sheboygan, fucking that suburb of Milwaukee. What is it? Fucking hell. I can't do it off the top of my head. Go to MLW.com, folks. And we're doing TV up there. And that's June the 1st. And don't forget, see me on BN Sports Saturday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern on Major League Wrestling Fusion, or the YouTube channel just a few days afterwards. And also, I will be at the Pro Wrestling Night at the Florence Freedom on Thursday night, June the 6th. It's basically we're taking over the Florence Freedom, the whole stadium, in their game on against the Windy City Thunderbolts. Me, Jim Ross, Billy Gunn, Marty Jannetty, Pro Wrestling Night, $1 Miller Lite and Coors Light drafts. It's WBEBN Thirsty Thursday on June the 6th. So anyway, FlorenceFreedom.com/wrestling night for all kinds of ticket, autograph, and meet and greet information. We're going to have a good time. Take me out to the ball game. Can you buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack, Brian? I don't care if we ever go back.
Do you eat Cracker Jacks?
I don't eat Cracker Jacks. All my teeth are crowned. But peanuts are okay. Give me some extra peanuts.
You know, the Cracker Jacks now, the last time I had one at the ball game, actually, less peanuts than ever before. It ruins the Cracker Jacks. You want to get a good distribution of peanuts with each crown-busting caramel.
Well, wait a minute. Well, okay. Well, there's the thing. When you're eating Cracker Jacks, do you call it with each jack? What's the singular of Cracker Jacks? Is it each jack or each crack?
Each crack.
What? How do you like your crack flavored?
Jack style.
Well, there you go. Trademark. Anyway. Should we even plug YouTube at this point? I don't know. I'm blowing hot and cold on these motherfuckers.
Well, people know where to find it. Go to YouTube, search for Jim Cornette. If it's something that's not controlled by us, then it's some bootleg shit. Fuck those guys. But all the official Jim Cornette videos are up there right now. tinyurl.com/official Corny YouTube.
Yeah. We won't go into... What are you doing on your program these days, this week?
Couple quick notes here. I mentioned it last week, coming very soon to the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight, Then and Now, looking at the hundreds of hours of audio archives that John Arezzi has in his collection, all of his various radio shows, and reliving those classic memories. The show is coming very, very soon. You can find out more information right now at pwspod.com. It's also currently available to subscribe in various places like Stitcher, Podcast Addict. It will be on iTunes very, very soon. Once again, John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight, Then and Now at pwspod.com. And I also want to mention that if you are interested in any of the shows on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, you can get more information at facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard, or on Twitter. The page is at Superpodcasts. And speaking of Superpodcast, the 605 Superpodcast, the mothership! I think I broke Jim Cornette.
I was waiting to see. I put cotton in my ears.
The shows that we have mentioned that are in production.
What'd you say? What? What? Oh, wait, hold on. Okay.
The shows that we have mentioned are in production are still in production. We apologize for the extended production delays. There's a lot going on behind the scenes in Arcadian Vanguard right now. But I do want to mention, because like you said earlier, Jim, we have a lot of new listeners, and the Super Podcast has a lot of new listeners because of that. And a lot of people say, hey, I'd like to really catch up with the Super Podcast. There's a lot of inside jokes I don't get, a lot of references I don't get. I want to plug real quick.
Don't worry, folks. I've been listening for years. I still don't get them. It's like that old Steve Allen fucking line. Remember, do they get your program in Cleveland? Well, they watch it, but I'm not sure they get it.
Exactly. Well, you can get more information about the show, the official show wiki, which is run by our director of show research, Jace Nacarado, tinyurl.com/superpodwiki. And I also want to mention that Superpod...
Wait a minute. What is his name?
Jace Nacarado.
No, it's not.
Well, which part are you having a problem with? Is it the Jace or the Nacarado?
Jace Nacarado?
Jace Nacarado.
Or is it Jace Nacarado?
What is the difference between the two ways you just said it? What did I miss?
Well, one would be Jay Nacarado, and the other would be Jace Nacarado.
It's the second one. Jace.
Well, I like Jace Nacarado better.
So you see his name as being
But I think his first name should be Snooker. Oh, Snooker Snacarado.
Well, Snooker Snacarado is the man maintaining the show wiki. Once again, tinyurl.com.
Wait a minute. You're trusting a man named Snurky Snacarado?
He's a very
with your goddamn website?
He's a very trusty, snarky kind of guy.
Or Snooker. Well, that's his brother. It was two boys, Snooker and Snurky Snacarado. I wouldn't trust either one of them with a website, but that's just me.
Well, whatever it is, I'm sure he will never speak to me again, but you can get more information. tinyurl.com/
Well, you're better off without him.
Of course, I also want to mention Super Podcast and Mothership t-shirts, stickers, magnets, and much, much more. tinyurl.com/superpodstore. And I want to thank everyone, all the new listeners, for not just the Jim Cornette experience, but for the Super Podcast. Thank you so much for jumping on board the Mothership.
Boy, we had a fun time in Charlotte. A hot time in the old town last Saturday night. The NWA Crockett Cup in the Cabarrus Arena in Concord, North Carolina. Somebody got mad at me for saying Concord instead of Concord. I was in a hurry. But anyway, what a world of difference. I know you're backed up on your shows as well as your bowel movements, so you haven't had a chance to see it, Brian, but I haven't even had a chance to watch the broadcast back because I enjoyed it so much and it was so good that I want to actually sit down and watch it all the way through, and I haven't had 3 extra hours with filling the Cornette's collectibles orders and dealing with, running the empire ever since I've been home. But it was good to see a bunch of old friends. I went down there on Friday, and I knew one thing. I was not going the direct way between Louisville and Charlotte. I was not going to come back that way because Interstate 85 can kiss my big fat white ass between Spartanburg, South Carolina, and Charlotte with all the construction and the bullshit. So on the way back, I just came up north to Charleston, West Virginia, and turned left. But got a chance to have dinner with Dennis Condrey and his wife Teresa on Friday night, and Saturday was one of those loaded days. We left the hotel because it was about 30 minutes to the arena. So we left the hotel at 9:30 Saturday mornings to make sure that we were there in time for the VIP session to open up. Did the VIP panel with Billy Corgan, which was fun, talking about old Chicago wrestling and just answering the folks' questions. We did the autograph and meet and greet session for pictures, did pictures with the Crockett Cup. Got that done. Then obviously I was doing color, so I had to was involved in the production meeting and then the announcers meeting. And then went on the air at 7:00 and did a 3.5-hour show, and then congratulated everybody on the way out, and finally got back to my hotel about 12:15 the next morning. So it was one of those days. It was fun, but I'm too old for this shit. I think I say that every time I leave the house, don't I? I'm not sure.
Pretty much. A few times a year, you hit me with that, and then you end up getting busier than you were the year before.
Yes. But anyway, So it was fun to meet a bunch of the old Charlotte fans as well as some of the new ones. Billy Corgan actually drew a few younger people to the VIP session. It wasn't all just folks from our era.
Does he know his Chicago wrestling history? Does he know his stuff?
Well, yes, and we were talking a little bit about the Bob Luce collection. Part of it was he's got like 9,000 negatives because Bob Luce started in the 50s taking pictures at ringside at the International Amphitheater for the Wayline magazine.
Yeah, for Fred Kohler.
So he's got all those negatives, and he's got the show sheet reports for the International Amphitheater. And you can see where he said at one point they went like 120 something shows in a row at an attendance figure that was considered a sellout, like 12,000 something or whatever it was. Right. Even on sellouts, you're always, in a big arena like that, you're 100 or you're 200 off or whatever. But, that was pretty much 120 shows would be 5 years every 2 weeks. They were selling out, and Luce kept all those show reports and everything. Anyway, that was very cool. But the Rock and Roll Express were there. Magnum TA, Nikita Koloff, Tommy Young continues to crack me up. And as I mentioned before, he's just like, Corny, it's been 30 years this November since I broke my neck and haven't been able to referee. And I can't believe they still remember me. And they want, and blah, blah, blah. He's awestruck by this. And, once again, the best in the business. David Lagana popped when Tommy got in to be the special referee as far as giving the instructions for the NWA World Title match and then patrolling ringside, which he ended up kicking that no good dirty Camille out of ringside when she tried to cheat. He got in the ring and he started inspecting the turnbuckles and then looking around at them and make sure there's no debris on the mat and check the tautness of the ropes, which most referees these days just like a prop, like an extra in a fucking movie scene, just get in the ring and stand there in the corner and wait to do something. Tommy Young was a referee from the time he got in the ring till the time he left. And the little things. And he wasn't even trying to make people watch him do it. That's just what he did. Everything that a legitimate referee would do was second nature to him in a worked environment. He was an artist. It was Tommy Young. Anyway, saw all those guys, but also some of the Ring of Honor guys that I haven't seen in forever, the Briscoe brothers. I'm going to say this. I do not rescind my statement that I believe that the Revival are the best in-ring working tag team today as far as performing professional wrestling at a high level. They are the best tag team in the ring today. The Briscoe brothers, I can't say their gimmick because it's not a gimmick. And I can't even really say for their promos because they're not cutting promos. They're the Briscoe brothers are the tag team personalities, the best in the business today. And honestly, I think if I was going to build a tag team division in a company of young guys who hadn't been overexposed on television, I would build it around the Briscoe. Oh, wait, I did. And they're still as good. They're still as good today. And as a matter of fact, if take my money, said Fry from Futurama, put that meme out. If the Briscoes ever face the Revival, I will goddamn buy a front row seat. But those guys are tremendous. Rhett Titus is looking fantastic. He's bodybuilding now. He's got like 4% body fat. So many. Joey Mercury, who I haven't seen in a long time. I ran into him a few years ago, but who worked with us here in OVW, and he was the brains behind M&M.
That's the best thing he ever did. M&M are one of the most underrated tag teams. Not that their matches were the greatest, but they were a main event act in OVW.
Well, they were the new Freebirds. They were the modern Freebirds. And that was all Joey had started. It was Johnny Impact Nitro, John Morrison, however you know him, and Melina. And Joey was the one that was not under contract, but he was the veteran. And he got the fur coats, and they came up with the paparazzi and the red carpet and the fucking music. And they would go out and do videos with one of the guys that was good at videos and just bring them to me and say, can we use this? I said, just, let me watch it and tell me how long it is. We'll put it on, and they were doing stuff for television. It was brilliant. And of course they brought them up there and ruined them, but they could have been a main event fucking tag team. But anyway, it was Joey, and I've always given him the credit for that. He was there as a producer. Todd Sinclair, Paul Turner, the referees. He tweeted something about it, so I don't think that this will embarrass him. But Kyle Durden, who used to do locker room interviews in the HDNet TV days of Ring of Honor, he has hated me for like fucking 9 years because he thought after HDNet TV went off the air, we didn't debut on Sinclair until that fall. And we did not bring him back as a backstage interviewer. And he's hated me ever since because he thought that I was like, oh, that fucking Kyle Durden, fuck him, he's no good. I said, Kyle, we couldn't even afford to fucking fly the world champion. They were limiting our plane tickets at the time. You lived in fucking Florida or wherever, right? So after all this time, he found out, no, we just couldn't afford to, fly an announcer at that point. And he's like, oh, never mind. Then we're hugging each other, right?
Hey, can I ask you about one that I'm really...
Stabbed me in the neck for 9 years. And go ahead. Yes.
Did you see Gary Juster?
I did not, because he was tired and didn't come. It was a story I heard. I heard that he had told, some people, oh, we've just been on the road every weekend. And there was not a Starbucks anywhere in sight. So, no, he didn't come.
Wow.
However, I did have a nice chat with Greg Gilliland.
Greg the Office Boy?
Otherwise known as Greg the Office Boy. And he actually said, he was thinking about getting a T-shirt that said Greg the Office Boy to wear just for that occasion. But it has been, a little over 6 years since Greg and I had crossed paths. But I always tell the truth and I always admit things. And I will admit that on this particular weekend, Greg Gilliland went out of his way to make sure that some things were right for me and the rest of the legends, shall we say, that he would not have done years ago, and probably to avoid any further future animosity. But no, we actually we shook hands and said bygones be bygones, because as I told him, I said, I left at the right time because I didn't have a heart attack and you didn't get strangled. So we both prospered. And now look at us. We're both making more money than we were back then. And he said, looking at it that way, he believed that I was probably right. So, but he did go out of his way to set some things up. And Mark Davis, in production, for which the production now, boy, if somebody had only thought, if we just buy this first-class equipment that we can carry around and stream events and produce events, if we just had this beautiful modern technology with these big... They have the tech area now is as big as some of the buildings we used to run Ring of Honor shows in 10 years ago. So it was a pleasure to be a part of the production. The audio was great. That's what I was going to say. The 70th anniversary event, I talked to Billy Corgan, and he said that it was a great show in Nashville in October, but it wasn't who they were as a television production. And this completely erased that problem. This was the smoothest production, actually, I think, that I've been involved in. I don't know how fucking long. And everybody, and I've enjoyed working with Joe Galley again from the NWA, but also Ian Riccaboni, who is almost terminally cheerful, with a smile on his face from Ring of Honor. It was a 3-man booth, but it wasn't awkward. Those guys were great to work with. So it was a lot of fun all the way around, but especially, I'm not going to go through the whole thing brick by brick and blow by blow, but everybody was on their game to the best of their ability, whatever their level of ability was on the show. But especially if the Briscoe brothers and the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky and Robert turned the fucking clock back. I'm not just because they're my guys. I will say that they have not worked this hard, nor got this response, nor had a match like this in several years. Let's put it that way, in my opinion. And it just clicked, and the people were into it, and it as the old saying goes, they tore the house down. And the retweets of Ricky Morton doing a Hurricane Rana at what he admits is 63 years of age, and then following that with the Tope Suicida. Before, and once again, I don't think it's breaking anything that anybody doesn't know about the wrestling business or does know to say that afterwards I told the Briscoes, I said, you were just beating up a bleeding Ricky Morton in Charlotte, North Carolina. You realize that's like getting to get on stage with Frank Sinatra. And they were like, oh, yeah, they were just over the moon. But at the same time, it kicked quite a bit of the rock and roll's ass while they were at it. But that thing, really blew the roof off. PCO, you can't not be impressed with this guy. He's 50 years old now. He's lighter and looks in better shape than when I worked with him in the WWF 20 fucking plus years ago. And he's goddamn taking bigger bumps. He isn't human. He's impressive as fuck to see him, especially live. I'm not advocating that everybody should take bumps like this, as I usually don't, but goddamn, he is also, for him, it's led to a career resurgence because he's got something wrong with him somewhere that he's able to do this at this age and perform like that. And I wouldn't recommend it. Don't try this at home, folks. It was good seeing Medusa again. Love me some Medusa. And I felt bad for her because her promo on the program, one of a couple of different things she did was not what she wanted it to be. But one of these things, and I've had this happen, right before she's ready to go out and has what she's doing in mind, somebody came up to her, official from the show, and started talking about something else. And something else that was going to, and basically it threw her off. So when she didn't get focused as she could have been until the end, and she felt bad about it. But same thing, and she didn't want to be the bitch and be like, no, fuck off. I'm busy. I'm thinking about something, right? So she's trying to be when you're polite, which is why I'm usually not polite in these situations. When you're polite, it just costs you because you're the one's got to go out there. But anyway, Colt Cabana put in a serious pro wrestling performance. Mark that down in your little black book, wherever you keep it. That he actually and proved that he can do it when he wants to. And I had to call it as a result of that. I did mention that I'd been critical of him in the past for entertaining instead of wrestling, but he managed to be an entertaining wrestler instead of a wrestling entertainer over the weekend.
Jim, I've heard mostly universal praise for the event, so I'm actually looking forward to watching a good deal of it. People have sent me various clips. But I did hear from a few people, was there a dance break in the middle of one of the matches?
There was not cooperation amongst the opponents in the dance break. There was the tag team, and I'm trying to think, I believe it was in the Battle Royal. The tag team in the middle suddenly, before they fucking did their double dingbat or whatever they were going to do, they did their little double dance routine. So it wasn't like we were going into dance fever where all the opponents were cooperating, but I think they called it a floss or something. I don't know. But as I recall, the maneuver that they then followed that up with, I think it backfired. So maybe they took too much time and their opponents had it scouted. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, there was no I don't want to say interspecies, but there was no intermingling of the opponents dancing with each other suddenly in the middle of the match. I would have had to take a bathroom break for that one. But anyway, I'm building up to the main event. Obviously, I've seen Nick Aldis wrestle. It's the first time I've seen Marty Scurll live. These guys did a wonderful job. This was an NWA World Heavyweight Championship match. And it was not only a good match for today's eyes, but it would have fit on a Crockett Promotions house show in 1986. And that's the look they were going for with the show, with the retro logos and the new belts paying homage to the old championships. The new tag team belts are the goddamn belts that my favorite belts we ever held. The old Nikita Malkovich 70s NWA World Tag belts, except these are brand new and shiny as a fucking slicker and come on a gold tooth. But they wanted modern athletics, but with the retro look and presentation for when people still saw it as a sporting event, such as Tommy Young giving the instructions and checking the ring, the little things like that. But at the same time, here, Marty and Nick had a match that would have fit any era because it was good and it told a story. And these former friends that were going after a championship that have had a falling out over a difference of opinion, blah, blah, blah. There was blood, but it wasn't ridiculous. It was the bad taste and good taste principle in pro wrestling. They did just enough, but not too much, and everything was good. And I'll tell you another thing. It's almost impossible to impress Stan Lane, by the way. And Stan said, boy, he said, I talked to that Nick Aldis. Because he, like I said, Stan doesn't keep up, right? So he's a good-looking guy, carries himself like a champion, dresses well, like not like some of these. He said some of these kids that look like they're 150 pounds tatted out alternative rock stars, right? That was Stan Lane giving his impression of modern wrestling. But it's true. Nick, he not only has the physical charisma, but he has the physical ability and he has the fucking psychology. So he's got the mental and physical tools for wrestling. And they tore the house down and had a hell of a match. I wanted to recognize that. So I get, once again, for people who say, oh, he doesn't like anything about modern wrestling. Well, I do when it's done right and taken seriously by people that know what they're doing.
Hey, Jim, I said before I didn't see the event yet, but I've seen lots of pictures. And I saw a couple clips of the Rock and Roll and Briscoes, and that seemed like a lot of fun. But I have to say, I've seen people screw up what I guess, for lack of a better term, I'll call a retro look before. But from what I saw, that ring looked incredible. Whoever painted that canvas did a great job.
Yeah, not only did the ring look good, but also the camera angles that they used, because Jackie Crockett was there, Jackie and Francis Crockett, and I got to say, Jackie was the old social director for Jim Crockett Promotions in the 70s and 80s. And with all the rights and privileges that entailed, and you can imagine when you're social director for the Ric Flairs and the Blackjack Mulligans and the Snukas and et cetera. Anyway, and they walked Jackie through the production area, and he sat in on the meeting, and he explained that they staggered the height of their two hard cameras. One is for a loose shot of the entire arena, or the entire ringside area, I should say, ring post to ring post and with the ringside area. And another one is for the tighter shots closer up on guys, but they're a lot of modern TV wrestling. They're at the same level and they're just shooting in two different length shots. But with Crockett Promotions, they had one of them up and one of them down because it made the arena look bigger that way. And just little things like that. It looked like a Crockett TV show. And they did a lot of work to get that. And it registered with the fans that were there live, especially who remember going and seeing shows in that town that looked exactly like that. It was, and there's something that was mentioned Saturday night. There were a lot of kids there because the parents that brought their kids were kids when their parents used to take them to regular wrestling in Charlotte 25, 30 years ago, right? So I would say the crowd was 20% kids. And that was great to see. And there's a 4-year-old kid watching Nick Aldis and Marty Scurll and the blood and the gold championship belt and all the excitement. And somebody said to Nick and Marty on Saturday night, to that kid, you're going to be their Flair and Dusty, right? Because that's their first memory, their first reference, and all this pageantry being made over this thing. And so that was cool. It's nice to see that, and especially in a place where of any place else still yet in the country, the Carolinas still has a tradition of wrestling and where it can be presented the right way without people going, and rolling their eyes. It was refreshing.
Hey, 2 quick questions before we move on. There's a video I saw that I'm guessing is from in the middle of the show, a shot from the crowd, of you running as fast as I've ever seen you run.
Oh, God.
To the back of the arena. Was that just a bathroom break or was it something else?
No. Here's the thing. The only thing I didn't like about the production, and I told them this, was that the announce position was not at ringside in this big building, was not at ringside at a desk where we could be in the middle of the action, but it was for the sake of the shot or whatever. It was up on the second floor at the end of the building where they could shoot us with the ring and the arena and all the people behind us. And so it looked like a cool shot when they went to us on camera, but we were effectively as far away from the fucking ring as we could possibly be in this building, and watching the monitor with our backs to the building. So it's hard to feel in the middle of things like that, you know. But anyway, to conduct the interview, I had to go from the announced position over across the building to the stairs, down the stairs, and all the way the length of the floor to go back around the aisleway and get in the ring. And once I got out of the ring, I had to do the same thing to get back up. So I was running to the stairs, right? But when I got to those stairs and looked up and saw that's about fucking 3 or 4 levels of residential stairs, I started walking again. I said, fuck it. If I run, I won't be able to talk by the time I get back to the fucking microphone. But I was from the ring to the announced position because the match had suddenly broken out. Imagine that, a match between the Rock and Roll Express and the Briscoe brothers suddenly erupting from an interview I was doing with the Rock and Roll Express, where the Briscoes interrupted and violence suddenly was flung up against the wall, and I had to escape. I don't know how that happened.
And then my second question, everyone's been putting over your performance once again as a commentator. A lot of people really enjoyed the event. You had a good experience reuniting with a lot of wrestlers who were there when you were previously there. You even had a good experience with Greg.
Oh, and gosh, and I didn't even mention I got the chance to sit down and talk to Joe Koff. And if he ever heard this show and I didn't mention him, we went off in a different direction. I was so hung up on Greg, but Joe Koff and I had a nice talk also. He was telling stories about the MSG show and how far that they have come. And so we got a chance. I've always liked Joe. Joe's always been a gentleman to me. So I don't want to miss mentioning him.
Well, my question is, other than Gary Juster, who obviously was exhausted and unable to be there.
He was tired. I think he has tired blood.
You had a positive experience, though, the rest of the weekend. Is the door open in any way, or is it ridiculous to think this way, for at some point in the future for you to do anything with Ring of Honor, whether it's commentary or anything else? I mean, is the door open, or is it just one time, nice seeing everyone, I won't see you again?
No. I didn't leave and say, fuck all you guys, I'll never come back, but I didn't even really knock on the door. As far as it was a Ring of Honor and NWA co-promotion, and the Ring of Honor production was being used, and I'm sure they will work together more in the future because everybody seemed to be enjoying themselves. I am committed to doing more NWA events, so the same situation could happen. But no, Ring of Honor is a weekly television program. I'm not. I can't do anything every week anymore. I'm lucky to take a shit once a week these days. So no, I'm not. I don't know if there would be anything for me to do or that I should pursue doing on any of the Ring of Honor branded events going forward. But who knows? You never know about these things.
There you hear it. We'll see you in the winter. Final Battle 2019.
Oh, shut up.
Cornette returns.
No, I'm on enough. I can't be on any more television networks. There's going to be some kind of antitrust legislation taken out against me. I'm on Vice. I'm on beIN Sports. I'm on MLW on Free Sports in the UK and in Ireland. I'm on Fight TV with the NWA event. I'm on, I think MLW may be on Fight. I'm on, what else am I on here? YouTube. Well, no, I'm talking about television platform. We were on, it was traditional pay-per-view. I actually taped the event on traditional pay-per-view, the Crockett Cup, so that I could watch it back whenever I get 3.5 hours where I can pay attention to something. So they're gonna sue me for having a monopoly if I'm on any more television stations or networks right off the bat. I hope WEBN night at the Florence Freedom on June 6th is not on national television. That may be a conflict of interest. They may have to black out my halftime festivities. Remember, I'll just be blacked out locally. If there's dollar beer night, I may just be blacked out, period. You never. Anyway, all right, with what we have left of the program, and I hope I didn't miss mentioning anybody there over the week, but we really did have a lot of fun and got to see, and Billy Corgan was wonderful to sit down and talk to for a while also. And I have to say I was wrong about that. What did they buy? They've done a great job, as the NWA hadn't been this high profile in 25 years. But anyway, we do have a couple of follow-up things on our episodes the last few weeks on the I can't say the word screw job with a straight face. We've explained that that's not even a wrestling word, right?
No, we've never actually discussed the origin of screw job as it was applied to Montreal on the show.
What Montreal was a double cross. Screw job is a term that a lot of the emerging smart wrestling fans of the 80s and the newsletters of the 80s kind of popularized. Because in the old days, if it was, if the booker was to give you a finish and you were going to beat the babyface, use some type of dirty tactic, you'd say, yeah, you hit him with a fuck finish, fuck the babyface. And so then some of the more prudish and less, vulgar wrestling bookers, I'm sure there's one or two somewhere, might say screw the baby face or whatever, but a fuck finish was everybody was working and everybody was in on it, but you cheated to win. That was a fuck finish, or you screwed the baby face. That was that was what that was. A double cross is completely different. It's a double cross, but for some reason the Montreal screw job was attached to it because I guess Brett screwed Brett and all that screwiness going on. But it's not really a screw job because it wasn't a fuck finish. It was a double cross. So the Montreal double cross shows we did. There's a cut with, then we had Meltzer on and we talked of the follow up on Dark Side of the Ring. I have a follow up on, let me figure out how to phrase it. Right. Okay. When last we left, I'll sound like the narrator on Lost in Space. When last we left the Hart family, Brett had walked out after getting double crossed and Brett was gone. And I remember a writing day about 2 or 3 weeks later when Vince was telling me, and I'm going to use the name Russo instead of Shitstain every time, just in case any of our new listeners don't know who Shitstain is. It's Vince Russo. I'll use his names to keep this story clear. I remember Vince McMahon telling Vince Russo and I, we've got legal sending Brett a letter because they had their legal department send Brett a letter because Brett had been trying to talk Owen into leaving the WWF and coming with him to WCW. And I remember Vince saying that legal was sending him a letter. And I thought, I can understand why he's doing this, but right, you couldn't really say anything to Vince at that point. And of course, there's Russo going, yeah, that's right. It was tortuous. A tort, like a legal tortuous interference with Owen's contract that they threatened Brett with a lawsuit for trying to talk his brother into after they double-crossed him into coming with him, right? Well, I remembered that side of the story, but it wasn't until Meltzer and I were comparing notes on both sides of the situation. Bret Hart, guess who told, apparently, Vince McMahon and Titan Sports that Bret Hart was tortuously interfering with his brother? Vince Russo. Because a couple weeks after the fucking Montreal deal, Vince Russo calls Bret up. And he's acting like he's his good friend and he's sympathizing with him. And, oh, man, I can't believe they did what they did and there had to be another way or whatever. So then in the conversation, Bret brings up that he wants Owen out of there. He was trying to get him to come to WCW because, and we'll talk about Davey in a second. And then Russo, as Reggie B. Fine used to say on Memphis TV, then immediately delayed the information back to Vince McMahon, who then threatened to sue Bret for tortuously interfering with his own brother.
Why did Vince want to keep Owen so badly, considering the way everything went down?
Well, hold on, and I'm about to tell you that too. As a matter of fact, this is not something that just suddenly was a repressed memory. Bret had actually told Dave Meltzer the next day how Russo buddied up to him, acted like he was his friend, and then he let his guard down and mentioned trying to get Owen out of there, and it got the legal papers. Bam, right? But then with Davey Boy, because he was a member of the family too, but Davey, let's just say Davey at the time had some personal issues that I had seen him exhibit over the period of time where they were like, okay, if we're going to let one of them go, we're going to let Davey go. They made him pay $150,000 to get out, to buy his way out. He had like a fucking 4-year contract. So they let him buy it out for $150,000 to get out of his contract to go take a deal with WCW, where he got a guaranteed deal for several $100,000. Obviously, I don't know how much he was making there, but it was a good big time deal. But then that's when he got injured. Not long after. He wasn't in WCW. How long was it?
Oh, it was short. It was a short period of time.
And wasn't that the trapdoor deal?
It was, I think, the trapdoor for the Ultimate Warrior to magically appear in the ring, and Davey took a backdrop onto it.
This fucking knucklehead, fucking idiot goof Ultimate Warrior that once again Hogan was trying to get a fucking job out of and get use out of in some kind of way. They have a trapdoor built into the ring so that he can crawl through the ring and do whatever the fuck he's going to do. And Davey takes a bump on the handle of it. Like they've got a handle, and I don't know what the fuck anyway. And so he fucked his back up, and he was pretty much done. So they fucked up Davey Boy's career. But here was the thing. Vince kept Owen because Vince wanted to make Owen the Canadian hero. And me and Dave touched on this a little bit, but it bears repeating. Obviously, since you didn't pay any attention. Vince immediately tore up Owen's $250,000 a year contract and gave him one for $400,000 because he knew that Owen, a big deal, was providing for his family. And Owen wanted that guaranteed security in a place he was already in and at least kind of halfway knew what he was dealing with. And a $150,000 a year raise for a couple of years, however long the term was. And Vince even told us right at the beginning there, yeah, Owen's going to be our Canadian hero. I think he wanted to replace Brett and show that, well, it's my promotional machine, right? And also that way he could pay back the Hart family in his mind. And he wanted him to work with, and if you'll recall, when Owen came back, it was a run-in on Shawn Michaels at the next month's pay-per-view. And then they had a match in Richmond on a Raw where Michaels, playing off the concussion he'd had. No, that was after. That was years earlier. But anyway, it was a deal that Owen was going to work against Shawn and be in the title picture and in the mix and everything. And by the time that fucking Shawn and the rest of his buddies finished burying him and coming up with the nugget shit, the piece of shit that won't quite flush. We flushed Brett, but his little brother, they made him so secondary and played up the little brother thing so much and made it so silly that nobody was taking Owen seriously. And they eventually and he wasn't going to fucking do any jobs to Owen. So eventually they got that push cut off. So Owen was making that guaranteed money. But that's over the next year, they had him they wanted him to have an affair with Deborah, which he didn't want to do because his kids were in school. And so then they did the Blue Blazer thing because he didn't want to say no because they're paying him all this money, but he wasn't the main event fucking Canadian hero and challenger to Shawn Michaels that he was supposed to be. He was fucking mid-card guy because they buried him and they talked Vince out of it. So that's what happened. Oh, and then Owen. So they fucking, here's the thing when you think about this, they fucking buried Brett in WCW and then he got the concussion. So he was pretty much done. And they made Davey buy his way out of his contract and he went to WCW and their negligence hurt him. And Owen
Did Neidhart have to buy out too?
No, they just let him go. That was fine. And then with Owen, they want to keep him and make him a star and they give him a big raise. But then the fucking, Billionaire Boys Club of WWF, the Clique, buries him too. And they end up making him a mid-card guy. And he's up in the rafters in Kemper Arena. And there went Owen. So the wrestling business managed to botch up their entire family. 3 of the most talented wrestlers in the fucking history of the world in 18 months. Just being stupid.
What was it like for Owen after Brett left? Because obviously I'm assuming that he would spend most of his time at the arenas with either Brett or Davey or Jim or Pillman, who had been alive a month earlier. So when he comes back and Brett's gone and Neidhart's gone and Davey Boy's gone, who is Owen mostly spending his time with?
He was friends with Jeff Jarrett. He really was. And I know he rode with me a couple times. See, I wasn't on the road full time. I was going in and out for TV. So, I'm not sure who all his his writing group was. He wrote with me a few times in between TVs, but I think he wrote a lot with Jeff and Deborah. But it wasn't the same. And he told me flat out, he's like, I'm making money for my family. On one of the trips that we took, he was saving up because he mentioned, I think, didn't he want to be a firefighter because he was taking or going to take courses. He already had an idea that maybe however long this was going to last, wrestling, where he was still in his fucking early 30s, 5 years or whatever the big contract was, and then he would have a backup plan and to live at home in Calgary.
His brother's a firefighter, right, Keith?
Well, there you go. Yeah. Yes, I think that's what it was, and also, but anyway, so that was really fucked up enough. But here's also, once again, for these nitwits, this is another piece of information. For these nitwits who think that it's still a work or trying to say it was a work, they had depositions on both sides. The WWE sued to shut down Wrestling with Shadows, and they gave depositions. Brett looked into suing the WWE for breach of his creative control clause, breach of contract, but how can you win monetary damages for hurting your career in front of a jury when, number one, it's wrestling, and number two, you left a job where you were making $1.5 million a year and now you've made $2.5 million? That would have never passed a jury because they wouldn't have fucking got it. But and then Vince threatened to countersue. If Brett sued for breach of fucking contract, then Vince would countersue for assault and damage to the equipment. So all these fucking depositions and all these lawyers involved, they're going that far for a work when Vince McMahon has never gone that far. Even the stuff that he wanted people to believe was a fucking, it doesn't make any sense, right? So that's that. I just wanted to clear those things. But yes, Vince Russo strikes again. He was the one, as 20 years later, when we're all comparing notes about what we were hearing from different sources at the time, Shit Stain strikes again, stabbing somebody in the back. I'm surprised he wasn't like, Brody, mi amigo, por favor. I'm surprised it wasn't Vince Russo.
Do you remember how long it was after Montreal that you guys found out that Brett was mic'd by Wrestling with Shadows for that conversation with Vince earlier in the day at Montreal?
I don't remember when I learned that very thing because I wasn't on the creative team that much longer. And as a matter of fact, we can go into that while we still have time in this program. One more thing before we go. I have my book out again because, as we all know, Montreal was November 9th, 1997. And then, as we all know, I left and bailed the fuck out of there quickly. So the next day, I sneak in, wondering if anybody's wanting to beat me up, right? And everybody looks at me normal, so I'm like, okay, I'm covered so far. And that's when we have the production meeting, because that's a Raw taping in Ottawa, Ontario. And obviously, Brett was not there. Obviously, nobody ever expected Owen or Davey to come either, right? Because they're family. Vince didn't, and there wasn't even heat on them for not coming. That was an understood thing that was probably going to happen. That's when, out of loyalty and indignation, Mick Foley did not come to TV and sent word that he would not be there because he was offended that Vince did that to one of the boys.
Were there any stories yet about what Rick Rude was thinking? Obviously, this is before he made his jump.
I don't recall exactly. Rick Rude may have been thinking I'm fucking out of this fucking lunatic asylum anyway soon. I don't know. But so they asked me, because I'd had the longest relationship with Cactus, they asked me to call him that night when I called him when I got back to the hotel and asked him to come the next day. He didn't leave the country. He did not come to TV as protest. And I felt, now here's the thing, I felt bad because, like, okay, as we've already mentioned, and I don't need to beat it up anymore, but the spot was my spot, and now I'm trying to and Cactus is mad at Vince McMahon for doing something I suggested to do. Oh, I'm like, fuck. But at the same time, and I say this in public, I presented him with this: Cactus, come and tell Vince how you feel in person, because Undertaker did. Undertaker let him have it. And, he heard from a few of the boys. But I said, come and tell Vince in person how you feel about it and make your feelings known. Nobody's saying you shouldn't do that. But to not come back to work and risk your employment the Foleys have kids, and Brett's fixing to leave a job where he's making $1.5 million, and he's going to go make $2.5 million. Is he going to pay the Foleys' bills? Which was basically for real. I mean, it was right for him to be indignant, but it wasn't fair for him to penalize him. If all the boys had a fucking staged a group walkout, well, maybe then we'd have a union. Who knows? But it wasn't fair for Mick to. I've always said it. He's too nice. He's too nice being a wrestler. If Mick Foley and Bobby Eaton were roommates for 3 months, if they moved out and away from each other, Bobby would have everything Mick owned, and Mick would have everything Bobby owned. They're too nice. But anyway, so we got Cactus to come back to TV the next day in Cornwall, Ontario. As I recall, it should have been named Cornhole, but that's a different story. But then the following week, when everybody got back and got settled fucking down and realized, that's when we talked about Vince thought he was going to be the babyface. He's at the studio. He cut the interviews, the time-honored tradition and all that stuff, and quickly realized he was not going to be. And I think it wasn't maybe past that following weekend. Wasn't he just doing that? Like it only lasted maybe 1 week on TV. Maybe it was 2 that he was thinking he was going to be the babyface. But pretty soon he realized that this was turning against him. And once again, Russo was right there right now with all of this because this was his dream come true. It's real. It's real drama and horseshit. He can really fuck this wrestling stuff. Now I can write this shit like the Jerry Springer Show and win a fucking daytime Emmy or whatever the fuck he was, or just do he called it Crash TV, but what it was trash TV. That's where he got the idea. He changed one letter of a word like he did with most everything and then took credit for it. He was wanting to do trash TV. He was salivating, and here was his chance. Here's all this fucking drama and all this chaos. And now Vince doesn't know which way to go. Yes, Vince McMahon, the evil Mr. McMahon, is the greatest heel character in the history of television. But what this did was it also opened the door for all this fucking Jerry Springer bullshit that we would have to fucking look at and listen to for the next, 2 years. So anyway, the weekend of right before Thanksgiving, it was a weekend of house shows. Richmond, Virginia, Greensboro, North Carolina, Hampton, Virginia, and then the TV's Raw tapings were in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Roanoke, Virginia on November 24th and 25th. And that was really the first TV tapings that we had done since the set in Montreal or in Canada after the incident that had already pretty much been established everything. So here was the new direction starting because now Vince is like, okay, I want to be heel, blah, blah, blah. I remember this because do you remember, you watched Raw back in those days. Do you remember the Stone Cold Steve Austin pickup truck?
Yeah.
I drove the Stone Cold Steve Austin. No, here's the thing. They were going to take it to, I know it was these TVs, because then I went home, I brought it home with me. They were going to take the goddamn Stone Cold Steve Austin, hell yeah, Austin 316, 100% whoop ass, black pickup truck to TV, but they were going to put it in a truck and haul it or whatever the fuck. And they knew I was driving because it was Thanksgiving. I was going to make the TVs and then come home to Louisville, right? So they said, you want to drive the pickup truck? I said, sure. So I drove from Stamford, Connecticut, all the way down to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Roanoke, Virginia. And that's where you've seen that picture of me and Tommy Noe and Brian Hildebrand in the back of the truck. I drove then from Roanoke down to the Tri-Cities to visit Brian because that's when he had gotten sick first, I believe. And we had that picture taken. And then I drove on home for Thanksgiving and the Thanksgiving weekend. So I had the fucking Stone Cold truck with me. You get some looks when you're getting gas in that thing, right? And that's the weekend that I ran into Danny Davis at our favorite fish place, Clarksville Seafood. And he invited me over and showed me the OVW, the old place over in Jeffersonville. It was a goddamn hole in the wall, but he told me what he was doing with it and what he was making out of it. and how he was doing everything himself, and that he had the contract with the Gardens and a little local 30-minute TV, the whole 9 yards, right? So automatically my wheels have started turning because I've gone, as I mentioned on the previous shows, October, Pillman passes away. 3 weeks later, whatever it is, there's goddamn Montreal bullshit. All is sitting in the room with fucking Russo and Vince McMahon every fucking week, listening to that goddamn. And now he's worse than ever because he's pitching all this fucking Jerry Springer shit. And my weight is enormous because I'm aggravation eating. So I weighed 278 pounds that weekend when I got back to Connecticut. That's the most I've ever weighed in my life. And I started thinking about an escape strategy of coming and partnering with Danny Davis and promoting wrestling in Louisville. Whether or not the WWF was involved in it remained to be seen, right? But that's someplace I can go whenever I can. I've had all I can stands. I can't stands no more. So we get back, and now it's December, and we do the Springfield, Massachusetts In Your House pay-per-view that was originally going to be, remember the 30-day extension that Brett was allowed to have where he could come and drop the title then?
That's right, yeah.
Well, that's where it was going to be. It ended up being Shamrock and Shawn Michaels. And once again, in a goddamn coincidence, I said, well, change the title and book him with Shamrock. He'll fucking lose there. Change the match and book him with Shamrock. He'll lose the title, right? Well, they booked Shawn against Shamrock, but they don't want him to shoot on him. So that's a shame. Anyway, so basically Thursday the 4th Wednesday the 3rd of December would have been our writing day. And, whatever the fuck we got set for the In Your House in Springfield. And then the next day in Portland, Maine was a Raw taping. And the next day in Durham, North Carolina, Durham, New Hampshire was another Raw taping. So we were doing 3 days of television in a row because it's coming up on the holidays. And, for various reasons, including cost cutting, they used to stock up in those days on TV so you didn't have to do it over Christmas time. But then I remember that same week, instead of a house show in Lowell, Massachusetts on Thursday the 11th, they added a Shotgun Saturday Night and Raw taping. The Raw would air December 22nd, so that way they could get away from Christmas. So here is what led to me leaving the creative team, and I'm going to dispel another rumor here when I get there. That week, I find out not only we're going up Saturday night to Springfield, Massachusetts, we're doing the pay-per-view on the 7th. We're doing Raw in Portland on the 8th, Raw in Durham on the 9th. Then on the 10th, we're going to be off. There's a house show, but the TV crew, the creative team, we don't have to go there. But then we're going to be in Lowell, Massachusetts, literally like 50 miles away from Durham or whatever, on the Thursday. But yet, Vince has still scheduled a writing day in fucking Greenwich for Wednesday the 10th. So we'll have to drive back from Durham, New Hampshire to our homes, leave about fucking 8 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, go down to Vince's, sit there all day, and then drive back up 200 miles fucking Lowell, Massachusetts. So I had an idea. And on Friday the 5th, I believe it was, because that's the last day I would have been able to really call and ask, right? I pitched an idea. Before I went on this weekend trip, I called Beth, Vince's personal secretary. She's the gatekeeper, right? If you needed to ask Vince a question or in any way communicate with Vince, you always call Beth, and she got your answer. I said, Beth, I got an idea. I said, this situation next week with the travel. I said, how about for the 1 week, I'll stay up there. And because Vince Russo has a family. He's got kids. Let him come back and spend some time with his kids and do the meeting on Wednesday. I'll stay up there and I'll cover the TV in Lowell and he don't have to come. And that way he can have an extra day home with his family and it'll save company expenses and all that stuff, right? Because I'm like, fuck, I got to fucking get out of this goddamn somewhere or another because I'm going to choke somebody if I have to make this fucking trip. She says, I'll let you know. And she called back and said, that sounds good. Okay, great, right? so I do that. And then, of course, Russo, being the fucking little kiss-ass suck-up that he was, he ended up going back, and he came back to Lowell anyway. I remember that, even though I offered him to cover for him. But from his own little chicken lips, from his own little weaselly lips, he has said, well, I just got Vince alone, and I told him, hey, it just doesn't work with me and Cornette. You know, there's so much arguing and bickering and blah, blah, blah. We can't get anything done. The day that I offered to leave him home with his little howl at the moon kids and his long-suffering wife so that he could have some home time and I could stay up there and avoid that drive, that's when he fucking bit me in the ass and went behind my back. Because that would be the time where he was alone with Vince. But you will also notice and I should say the punchline of this whole thing is, when I get back after Lowell, right, I'm pretty sure we didn't go to the office on Friday because that was a pretty long trip. So the next week, on Monday, that's when I would have called and said, hey, what's the schedule for this week? And that's when Beth told me, well, Vince doesn't need you Wednesday. He said he'll call you the next time you're needed. Excellent. I'll be waiting for that phone call.
Did you know what that meant right away?
I was hoping, but I wasn't sure. And so I said, okay, I'll wait for that phone call. That phone call has still never come. Because here's the thing. What a lot of people don't understand is that they have painted, well, because he also describes it this way, they think that Russo got me fired from a job in the WWF. Not only was I still doing all the other things that I was doing, but my money never changed. You were rotated in and out sometimes in those days. Well, Bruce was there a lot because he was, he kind of blended in and went with the flow of things.
Ass kisser.
But I didn't say ass kisser, but you were rotated on and off the creative team, but that didn't in those days, it was such a small team, 2 or 3 people and Vince, that it didn't mean you were done. For example, I was doing fill-in commentary on those Raws in the Northeast that I just talked about. JR and I did commentary on Raw for those shows because that's when Vince had taken himself off as announcer and before they got their cruise set. I was still an agent and producer for matches at television. Hey, here's what we want. Go get with this guys. Tell them how much time they got and produce the match, agent the match, whatever. I was doing regular weekly syndicated commentary on Superstars at the time with JR and doing some of the international programs. Michael Cole had just started, I think, at that point, or maybe hadn't even started yet. But I did, as a matter of fact, it was a trivia note on Twitter. Me and Michael Cole were the announce team for the pilot episode of SmackDown on UPN. That was in '99. So I was doing announcing at the studio and on the programs. I was doing agenting at the television tapings. I was also working with starting to work more often with the local promoters on booking third-party guys and booking the job guys or the enhancement talent so it wasn't like they just said, okay, Cornette, you're done. What this meant to me was that I didn't have to fucking drive to Vince McMahon's house every goddamn Wednesday morning for an hour and a half in that fucking traffic, listen to Vince Russo shit out his fucking mouth for 8 to 10 hours at least, and then drive back in the same amount of fucking traffic and eat myself into a goddamn oblivion. I lost that, and everything else I kind of half-ass enjoyed doing by that point. Of course, I was still living in Connecticut, but I had at least took that off my plate because it's not like that. You don't, I've explained this before. When you're on the creative team, you're not the booker in the WWF. You don't book anything. You book what Vince wants you to book. You pitch ideas. Vince approves the shit at the top. And then maybe you get to fill in the stuff at the bottom under certain parameters, like what's a guy's name and whether he's a babyface or a heel and other important, pertinent information. It's not something that you have when you're a booker, then the company owner hires you and says, here is the roster that we've got right now. Make any changes you want, bring in whoever you want, kick whoever you want out. format the televisions, book my live cards, and give me all the finishes. That's what the booker does. You don't book for Vince McMahon. Nobody ever has. So it was not like I was losing my precious baby, the book of the WWF to somebody else. No, I just didn't have to listen to this fucking moron ramble on anymore. And it was less work that I had to do for the same amount of money. And it was not enjoyable at that point. It had been somewhat enjoyable a year and a half previously. It had long since the welcome had worn off of that aspect of the game. So when Dickhead says, well, he's just mad because Vince chose me over him, my vision. It was still Vince's vision. He was just the one chosen to crawl up Vince's ass and sleep there for a while.
And it didn't cost you any money.
And it didn't cost me any money because I was making the same amount of fucking money. And actually, I'm the one who suggested that I not make that amount of money when a year and a half later, then the following November, to finish up the OVW story, the following November, I planned ahead and went down to Louisville for the Thanksgiving break, where I was able to do Danny's TV on the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving and shoot an angle for a match that we had on the Sunday night house show in the same building, where I got a chance to see his operation and how it worked and meet everybody. And actually, I had a 6-man. It was me and Conway and Rob Conway and Nick Dinsmore against the Andretti brothers and that no good Star Maker Bolin in a 6-man tag match. And that's when I started percolating the real plans for a developmental program, because by that point they had started outgrowing the warehouse in the studio in Stamford, where if they're using a chainsaw or a wood saw to build a set, and the guys are breathing the fucking sawdust, or they're painting something and guys are getting blown up while they're smelling all this fucking paint. And, the people on the TV technical crew on their lunch breaks are standing around watching these guys, Kurt Angle, train. It was so fucking hokey for a company that size. That's why I went to JR when I finally said, okay, we can do this. We can put something together. And in the meantime, Kevin Dunn had split me and JR up from doing announcing because we were both too Southern together. So that was another thing I enjoyed doing that I wouldn't get to do anymore. And finally, I was basically fed up with the whole fucking thing. And so I told JR, I said, look, here's what we can do in terms of a developmental program. We have a school. We have local television. We have live events that we run, the sponsored shows in little small schools around the area. Have a contract with the Louisville Gardens for bigger events because there's nobody going to the Gardens these days. And the best part of it is, if you let me move to Louisville and try this out, you can pay me half what you're paying me now, and I'll take it. And that's how so I cut my own salary to get the fuck out of there. And within 6 months, they'd liked the job we were doing so much, then the salary was back up the same place it had been before.
Would they have gone for it if you hadn't offered to cut your salary?
Possibly, but I wanted to really clinch the fucking thing, because when Vince says no to something one time, it's almost impossible to get a yes the second time. So I was leaving pretty much regardless. I was doing less and less. I was wanting to do less and less, and my rope was about to run out. That's why I told JR right before that we got the word about this. I said, I just want you to know that I am planning to leave Connecticut the first day of July, and if I don't have a job, I'm going to hospitalize Vince Russo my last day here. And he's like, Corny, don't do that. I said, well, I'm hoping everything works out. So maybe part of it was we can pay him half and he won't fucking break Vince Russo's knees with a baseball bat. But anyway, so that was that. And just going back to December 97 for a minute, I remember basically that December 15th in Little Rock, Arkansas, which would have been pretty much the first week that I was off the goddamn creative team. I believe that's when Shawn Michaels caused the riot in Little Rock, because the people got rowdy and were throwing things. So he decided to just walk out of the whole goddamn show, and they didn't have the main event match, and people set fire to seats and everything. And I'm like, all I have to do now is read the fucking Finkel report, right? I don't have to goddamn hear this in the creative meetings and placate this little fucking prick and all the other people, we got a baby, and the other knucklehead exposing the business or wanting to do a goddamn cross between Dr. Phil and Jerry Springer every fucking week. I didn't have to fucking deal with any of that. So by Christmas time, 1997, that's when I started my diet, and I started at 278, the end of Thanksgiving weekend. And by July 99, when I moved back to Louisville, I weighed 197, which is the lightest that I'd been until fucking last summer. So
well, you also it's 100 pounds in a year.
A year and a half from Thanksgiving of 97 to the summer of 99. Don't say almost 100. I lost 81. But yeah, but that's when you are when you figure, life can go on. I can get out of fucking Connecticut.
Yeah.
I can get out of the room with Vince Russo. Then you have a reason to fucking live. And now my reason is I want to continue living, because you can be young and fat, but you can't be old and fat. And I'd rather be old than fat. But anyway, that's the aftermath with the Heart Foundation of Montreal. That's the aftermath with me. That's the aftermath with me and Shitstain and how we parted company there. Well, I still had to deal with him at the TVs, but I didn't have to sit in a room with him every Wednesday. And by the way, he identified himself. Let me just tell you another time when he believes this shit now. I can't even say another time that he's lying, because in his head, in his mind, he really remembers it this way. But he said on the Dark Side of the Ring, I was the head writer for the WWE during the Montreal screw job. Now, at one point, when they changed things after 99, when I left, came back to Louisville, or somewhere around that time, that he was the head writer, and Ferrara, they did give him a title. But in 1997, there was no such title or job as head writer in the WWF. You were a member of the creative team. My technical title was something of talent relations, because they really didn't have a creative team title. You're one of the guys that goes to Vince's house and helps him write the show. There was no titles. And I was as important as he was, and he was as important. I can't say those words. He was on the same equal status in everybody's eyes as far as a member of the creative team as I was, because nobody had any position over anyone except Vince. And then later on, when they gave him his stooge and his suck up and his butt buddy and his paper carrier, Ed Ferrara, then I guess to placate him, they gave him a title of head writer. But that was not the case in those days. There was no title of that. So he misrepresented himself there. And anyway, he's tried to claim to deflect the fact that I hate him because of his obnoxious attitude toward wrestling. He's tried to claim that he got me fired and cost me money. But no, it didn't cost me any money. And the only thing he got me fired off of was something that I was miserable to be on to begin with. It is the way that he approached wrestling, and the way that he approached the people in wrestling, and the lack of respect of same, and the whole fucking shit show that he implemented that made me despise him, whether he wants to believe it or not. Down deep, he knows it's true. And what was said on that program as well, when he said, it's freaking wrestling, it means nothing. That's exactly why my crusade against him will continue for so long. So I just wanted to clear those things up.
He didn't get you fired or cost you money in the WWE. Now TNA, that's another story.
Because Vince was much easier Vince was much harder to manipulate than old darling Dixie. And yeah, he took the opportunity to get me out, Dutch out, Savio Vega, everybody out. And then they brought Hogan and Bischoff in and fucked him the very next month. But no, he definitely went behind all our backs. The email documentation has been there. The proof has been there. He stabbed everybody in the back in TNA. But once again, I've lost jobs that I was more fond of than the one in TNA at that point in time, especially with no Dutch and no Jeff to keep me from strangling this fucking guy. So then that wasn't that large an amount of money that we're talking about anyway, but it was the principle of the thing. Just because when you tried to fuck me and didn't fuck me as good as you wanted to fuck me doesn't mean that I still shouldn't be mad at you for you fucking me.
Is it easier or harder to be principled in wrestling now versus then?
Oh, God, it's much easier now because everybody's nobody wants to offend anybody and everybody wants to make sure everybody's happy. Before, I always wanted to err on the side of safety and do everything I can, for other people within reason. But, there was free reign to just fuck people around back then as often as you wanted to in a lot of cases. But then we got corporate. Right. And there you have it.
Not a Montreal screw job, but someone else may have been doing some screw jobs to get people off the writing team.
Oh, yeah. Well, you go back and, not just that, but with Brett. After you've already double-crossed him, and you're going to fucking stooge on him to the boss for saying that what everybody already knew anyway, that he would want Owen to come with him, but just to get brownie points. Vance, it's like telling a teacher with this guy. It's like fucking, he's got to be the narc. He's got to be the hall monitor to get the brownie points so that you can see how great he is and reward him with, letting him have everything his way until, you go out of business. He's always been that way. Everybody he's worked with, or everybody here's the thing, not everybody has bad shit to say about him, but everybody that's really worked close with him in the same kind of level, not as like a writer talent, but as just as on the same level with him, has nothing good to say about him. And there's one more thing before I go. Writer. Here's another way that we're so far apart. You never had writers in wrestling. You had bookers. And being a booker was much more difficult than been some great writers, right? There's been Hemingway and Shakespeare and et cetera, and none of them have ever been in the wrestling business. Great bookers knew how to pick talent and how to match talent against each other that would bring the best out in each other, and how to juice up the rivalries and the confrontations with angles and little pieces of verbiage and things you could say and, stuff you could drop into conversation and little clues you could leave. And they knew how to manipulate the fans' emotions and what they would want to see in a particular territory, because some were more different than others, what they would want to see to keep them coming back week after week. And don't hot shot too much, and don't kill your baby face. He's got to be in jeopardy, and he's got to be in danger. And he's got to lose more than he wins, but he always has to win the blow off. But don't keep the blow off too long, or they'll lose faith in him. Or, get heat on your heel, but not too much heat where it's disgusting heat. The intricacies, and keep your roster happy, and make sure they make enough money, but that they won't leave, but not enough money that they get independent. And always make sure that the promoter is happy with, and all the other intricacies of being a promoter and why that was an art in wrestling. And he said at one time, Booker Schmooker, I'm a writer. Yeah, that's why you shouldn't have been anywhere near a fucking locker room, you fucking dickless twat. He wanted to be a writer because he thought that's what you needed to be in the wrestling business, because his limited cognitive ability and simpleton's understanding of what he had been watching on TV but had never been involved in, that's as far as he could get with it. To understand it was, I'll just be the writer and tell all these guys what to do. I always wanted to be a booker. I never wanted to be a writer. Writers shouldn't be involved in fucking wrestling. I've said that a million times. He never wanted to be a booker because he didn't understand what a booker was. He thought a booker was wrestling. I'm a writer. One day maybe he's going to win an Emmy. But he's the only writer I've ever known who claimed to be a goddamn big-time fucking college journalism fucking major. He's from New York City, and he went to fucking journalism school in Evansville, Indiana, if that tells you anything. And then still couldn't fucking spell when he got out of that fucking program. So that's what the difference was. He wanted to be a writer, and he did about as well as a writer does in wrestling, which is shit the bed, because it's not a person that understands what they're supposed to be doing. He never wanted to be a booker because he wasn't smart enough to understand that was even what he wanted to be. But he wasn't good enough to be that anyway. So that terminology, we should clear that up as well. Everybody from New York, Brian, that has promise in the literary world and wants to be a journalist or a writer, they go to school in southern Indiana, don't they?
That's usually the road to getting a book published, is you go to Evansville.
All right. Anyway, so just a few things that we wanted to all clear up there before we signed off. Next week, we have no idea what we're doing. You know what we're doing, Brian?
No idea.
Well, then in that case, everybody's going to have to tune in to find out next week when we have more of the Jim Cornette Experience here wherever you steal your favorite audio. And for the great Brian Last, I'm Jim Cornette. Keep watching. Order the Midnight Express Experience packages this coming Monday, May the 6th. And keep watching me on all my various outlets and broadcasts. And we'll see you next week, everybody. Thank you. Fuck you. Bye-bye.